Now, let's go to Parshat Vayelech. As I already mentioned, it's also a relatively very short parsha. And even the two parshas together are shorter than almost all the other parshas in the Torah. So the main thing I want to talk about is one of the mitzvot in this parsha. And that is what's called Vayakel. And you shall gather together. The mitzvah as given over in this parsha Vayelech is during Sukkot of the year following the Shemitah year, following the sabbatical year, meaning we're into what we'll call the 8th year, or in a certain sense, it's the first year of the new cycle of 7 years that make up a sabbatical cycle. Everyone is commanded to go to the Temple Mount, and the king reads from Mishnah Torah and gathers everyone together. That's why it's called Vayakel, the great gathering. The same word in English means a congregation. In Hebrew, a kihilah. A kihilah is a congregation, a group of people who come together, in this case, to daven together. But this is called the great gathering. Okay, so we're going to come back to it, but I want to share just a beautiful insight from Rav Ginsburg. Many of you are aware that we are producing every week what we call numerical gems in the Torah. Very short videos of 6 to 10 minutes, exploring a different numerical gem in the Torah. So this one I'm going to give over. If I wouldn't be giving it over now, it would be part of the numerical gems series. So Rav Ginsburg points out that the last 2 mitzvot of the Torah are in this parsha. And the third last is in the previous parsha of Ki Tavo. So he shares this numerical gem. We know that there are 613 Torah mandated mitzvot. So the last 3 are the 611th, the 612th, and the 613th. So let's start with the 611th. And this is from last week's parsha. And the mitzvah is the halachta b'derachav, to walk in God's ways. And this was the subject of last week's Pathways Through the Orchard. For those who were at the class or listened later, and if not, you can always access on YouTube, on our website, the class from last week. And that is, what does it mean to walk in God's ways? This is what's called to emulate God. And so what the sages say, well, how does one emulate God? So the sages said, just like God is compassionate, you should be compassionate. Like God is gracious, you should be gracious. Like God is patient, long-suffering, you should be long-suffering. And of course, these are all taken from, most of them, these 3 are taken from the 13 midot of rachamim, the 13 aspects of compassion that was revealed to Moshe after the sin of the golden calf. But in a broader sense, how do we emulate God? How do we walk in his paths? And last week I pointed out the halachta b'derachav. The halachta means to walk, but this is the word that we use for Jewish law, halacha, to walk. And so to walk in God's ways means very simply to follow the Torah. That is God's explicit expression of his will. And so to follow in God's ways we follow the Torah. So Rav Ginsburg pointed out, this is the 611th mitzvah in the Torah. 611 in Gematria equals Torah. So it's like these go together. The 611th mitzvah, the Torah of the mitzvot, is to follow the Torah, is to walk in his ways that he has revealed to us. The next one, the 612th, is this mitzvah of Vayakel that we're going to explore in another minute or two. 612 is Gematria Brit, covenant. And we already mentioned that in the previous parsha, that the idea of covenant and oath is repeated over and over again. And remember, Nitzavim, Vayelech, Azinu, V'zot, Habracha are all happening on the same day. So Parshat Vayelech and Nitzavim, that's why we're reading them together, because they're so connected. And so the idea of everyone gathering together is to strengthen the Brit. It's to strengthen the covenant between God and Israel, between Israel and the Torah. And of course, the mitzvah to gather is happening in Israel and our covenant with the land. So here, Vayakel is the 612th mitzvah, which equals Brit, covenant. The last mitzvah is the 613th, and that is in this week's Parsha Vayelech, where we are commanded to write a Sefer Torah. Here, we'll see that if you read it, you wouldn't pick up on that because it appears that God, is commanding Moshe to write down the Song of Ha'azinu. That's the next parsha, the Song of Ha'azinu. But the way that it's written, the way that the oral Torah was passed down, it means that not only should Moshe Rabbeinu write down the song of the Torah, but it means the entire Torah. And that we'll see in the last parsha that Moshe did write down the whole Torah. And we'll see in actually in this parsha also. And it was kept in the Holy Ark. But from this, we learn that every Jew is obligated to write a Sefer Torah. Now, obviously, you have to be a scribe to write a Sefer Torah. So the question is, so how do we fulfill this mitzvah? And so they say, if you contribute money to writing a Sefer Torah, you'll see all the time there are different campaigns, because to write a Sefer Torah can take a scribe an entire year to write a Sefer Torah. And so it actually costs a lot. A Sefer Torah is worth a lot of money. And if you contribute towards the writing of a Sefer Torah, that's how you can fulfill this command. The other way, and some of you may have experienced this, that when a Sefer Torah is about to be completed, so the scribe will write the outline of the last verse or two. And this is what's part of what's called the Hachnasat Sefer Torah, of bringing a new Sefer Torah into a synagogue. It's always a very, very joyous event. And sometimes they'll leave the last few sentences, and each person will fill in the letter and therefore fulfill the idea of writing a Sefer Torah. So this is the 613th mitzvah. And we know that there's 613 mitzvot in the Torah. So here, the last mitzvah of the Torah is writing the Torah that contains 613 mitzvot. So this I saw in a teaching from Rav Ginsburg. It really caught my attention. And so I gave it over to you. Now let's go back to Vayakel and some of the deeper understanding of this mitzvah. Excuse me. L'chaim, everyone. As I mentioned, this mitzvah happens during Sukkot in the year following the Shemitah year. So in a certain way, it could be thought of as the first year of the next cycle, but it also has an aspect of the eighth. And we know that eight in Torah and Judaism always represents one beyond the natural cycle of seven. It represents eternity. Many people have mentioned that the number 8, when it's turned on its side, is the sign of infinity. So the number 8, which is very connected to covenant. That's why circumcision is on the 8th day. It's one beyond an ordinary relationship. Again, circumcision represents the covenant between God and the Jewish people, which is beyond a natural type of relationship. It's an eternal, unbreakable type of relationship. So there is a tradition that, again, it's not in contradiction with other traditions, that Mashiach will come after a Shemitah year. But this is supposing that we keep the Shemitah. And that's why it's very connected to another tradition, that if all of Israel would keep 2 Shabbases, 2 consecutive Shabbases, Mashiach would come. The idea is, one is 2 Shabbases right next to each other. The other is keeping an entire Shemitah year. But the idea, in a sense, is the same. The idea there's a deep connection between Shemitah, which is a Shabbat. It's called a Shabbat Lashem, a Shabbat for God. It's a Shabbat for the land, but it's also called a Shabbat for God. So Shabbat and Shemitah are obviously connected. One is every 7th day, one is every 7th year. So this gathering of Vayakel represents, in a certain way, redemption. That everyone gathers together and is unified through the king. And remember, we talk about Mashiach as Melech HaMashiach, the Messianic king. So the king of the time represented the future full manifestation of Mashiach ben David, David HaMelech, King David. So I just want to read for you now what it says when it talks about gathering all of the people together. So it says like this. I'm not going to read the whole passage, but it says that everyone should come up to the Temple Mount and be seen by God. And then it says like this, hakel et ha'am, you should gather the people, ha'anashim v'nashim, the men and women, v'hataf v'gercha asher b'sharecha, and the children, and taf usually means even little babies, and the convert that is in your gates. Laman yishma'u, laman yilmadu, that you should hear and you should learn. V'yar'o et Hashem Elokechem, v'shamru la'asot et kol divrei Torah, that you should learn to have fear of God, to have awe of God, and to fulfill all of the Torah. So the question is, and Rashi addresses this, why would we bring little children? Again, if it meant like a child 5 or 6 or 7 years old, it might say yeled. Taf is usually used for little babies who are not going to understand anything, really. The question is, why bring them? So Rashi says is to give merit to those who bring them. So the question is, well, what is the merit if they don't understand? And so here there is a story in the Talmud that one of the mothers of a baby who became a sage, she used to take the baby, like in the cradle, to the Beit Midrash, to where they were learning Torah, so the baby could absorb the sounds of Torah. And so this is actually a very, very deep thing. What Rashi is saying, if we didn't have modern research, we may not understand fully what this means. And I already mentioned it before, that this idea that the way that we're brought up from a tiny baby has an enormous effect on us, and we don't remember. It's like, I'm just thinking an example, but you could think of a million examples. Let's say a little baby, there is a clap of thunder, like really thunderous, and it starts, is scared out of its wits and is crying and everything, and a few minutes later is calmed down. But it could be, again, this is just an example, we could think of a million things like this, that every time this person in the future hears a loud sound, they might go into not just a usual like momentary fright, but it could set off all kinds of psychological, emotional kind of things. The child has no idea where, the adult has no idea where it's coming from. Or let's say a child once ate a pickle, and it just and it threw up because of the pickle. And then years later, it's just like anytime you put a pickle, and they don't remember that's why they don't like pickles. Again, these are maybe very trite examples, but the idea is, we know psychologically that this idea of even bringing the little children, that they should be at this event, is going to have an effect on them. Not just it gives merit to those who bring the little children, but it actually has an effect on them. And I'm sure some of you have read this kind of research. They now say like 100% that a fetus in the womb is affected by everything that's happening around it, by sounds. Certainly, if the woman is smoking, is doing drugs, is drinking alcohol, these have physical effects on the child. But they say also that if a child from the womb is hearing beautiful music, it actually has a deep effect on their whole psyche. So this is like alluded to here with the question of why bring the little tiny babies. And then the last point that we're going to make is about where it says the convert. It's a very, very tricky thing because this word ger can mean two different things in a Torah context. And you have to have a oral tradition which it means, because sometimes when it's used, it means a full convert, someone who was not a Jew and becomes a Jew. And so they are a Jew in every sense. They have converted. But many times it means someone who follows the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. Here, the majority, the vast majority of commentators say that that is the ger that is talked about here. Because if it was a full convert, of course they would go. They're like any other Jew. Once you become a Jew, you're a Jew. So here, when it says your convert, it's meaning someone who is living in Israel, who is following the Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach. So the question is it a mitzvah on this person who follows this Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach to go? Or is it a mitzvah on the Jewish people to encourage them to come? So here, the commentator Evan Ezra says that we don't proselytize. We make anyone of previous religion or race can convert, but we don't proselytize. So here, we could ask, what is the reason to encourage someone who's keeping the Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach to come? And so here, the Evan Ezra says that they are not commanded to come, but we should encourage them to come. We should encourage them to come so that if they're keeping the Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach, they're doing it because they are connected to the Torah and to God, and they've renounced idol worship, and they're in a certain way keeping the basic 10 commandments. I'm going to put in a plug here I started watching, I think I mentioned him maybe in our discussion group, maybe online. His name is Ephraim Palnavov, and he has a 3-part series called the 30 mitzvot of B'nai Noach. And he explains how we get from 7 mitzvot of B'nai Noach to 30. It's a very, very, very fascinating. I've gone through 1.5 of them so far. I hope to finish the other 1.5. And what I want to mention is that in the second one, so when he's mentioning about the 30 mitzvot b'nei Noach and the whole relationship between Jews and non-Jews, between Jews and non-Jews who convert, non-Jews who become Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach, other people who don't become part of Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach, but become very attached to Israel and the Torah. There's all the different possibilities. And he goes into a beautiful explanation of Rav Ginsburg's idea that the time has come to teach the whole world Torah. And he explains it very, very, very beautifully. This is in the second of the series. I would encourage everyone to watch the whole thing. But that's what I wanted to get to here, is that here, by having the ger, the one who lives by the Sheva mitzvah Noach, if they're meant spiritually to then convert in full, so this would be an encouragement to them. If they keep with the Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach, it will also be an encouragement to them. And in our day, this concept of teaching the whole world Torah is that we want to share the light. We want to share the truth of the Torah. And everyone is going to, on their own, that's what we learn in this parsha, Ubacharta b'chaim. Everyone has free will. So those who are meant to totally convert, that is what will happen. Those who are meant to adopt the Shavah Mitzvah B'Ninoch, that is what could happen. And those who just want to be connected to Torah and Israel, want to be connected to the morals and the ethics and the spirituality and to the people of Israel and Eretz Israel, then that is where they should be. Everyone should be where they should be, but by exposing the whole world to Torah, then everyone has what to choose from, has what to choose. So because it says in Parshat Nitzavim, Ubacharta b'chaim, I'll end with a blessing that the new year is coming. And during the 10 days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in the Amida, we say, this, give me 1 second. V'zacharta b'chaim, melech chafetz b'chaim, v'kadveinu b'sefer chaim, l'man chai Elokim chaim. Remember us, God, for life, and write us in the book of life, the God of life. It's all about life, l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. And this year we should have a good life for us, all of Israel, and the entire world.